Oh,
There we
okay.
go.
I am now
Everything.
recording. You're recording. We got this covered, double plus good. And okay. So, um, hello, everybody. We're here today with Ginger Gentile. She is the director and producer of a documentary, a feature-length documentary called Erasing Family. This is her third feature-length documentary. She co-directed Erasing Dad, and that film made family bond obstruction, or I guess parental alienation, those kinds of things, front page news, and drove legislative and court reform in Argentina. More importantly, that film actually helped to reunite families. And Erasing Family seeks to kind of repeat this on a global scale with community screenings that provide a supportive kind of platform for kids and resources for educators and family court professionals. So, I mean, this is, I think, really the essence of your work, Ginger?
Yes, the essence of my work as the director of the Erasing Family documentary is to create a film that emotionally connects with young adults whose parents have been torn apart by the divorce process and the family court system, and letting them know that in many cases their parents tried the best that they could. In some cases maybe they didn't, but that there could possibly be a loving parent waiting for you on the other end of the phone line. Pick up the phone, talk to them. You have every right to know your family and decide for yourself what relationship you want to have with them, and not have that relationship be dictated by the court system or by the other parent. And only by reconnecting with their families, learning from them, and seeing the mistakes that they've made, can we as children not repeat those mistakes moving forward. So I always say you can love your family, you can hate your family, but don't erase them.
Okay, so this seems like a sort of a passion project for you, right? It really does. So is there something in your own personal history that you're willing to share with the audience that drove you to make these films?
So I actually address that in the first 2 minutes of the film. I briefly go into my history. I'm the child of a high conflict divorce. My parents
Oh.
divorced when I was 13.
Hmm.
And then also when I was in Argentina, I met who became the producer of the film, Gabriel Balanovsky. And the first thing he said to me on what turned out to be a date, I didn't know it was a date at the time, was that he was very depressed because he had not seen his daughter in 6 years. And like most people who didn't know about this issue, I said, well, don't worry, I'll go down to the courthouse. I was working as a legal translator in Argentina, and I'm sure we'll get this all worked out in a jiffy. And little did I know that I was entering a world where court orders are never enforced. You're guilty until proven innocent. These cases can go on for years and years. And, he himself was a victim of a grave injustice. He was actually in jail for a year and a half, accused of kidnapping, even though he had custody. And then, he was exonerated, and his case was even an example in like the books of like a miscarriage of justice, but that was used to basically erase him from his daughter's life. The good news in that case, though, and to give people hope, is that when she turned 21, after essentially 13 years of zero contact, they reunited.
Oh, wow.
So there is hope. And I think that the movie, even though when the movie came out, it didn't cause her to reunite at that moment. It did when she felt ready at 21. So I think there is hope. And, we never want to say, just wait till your kids are 18, they'll come back, because we know that's not true. But at the same time, having these messages of hope and providing parents with the tools to be ready for when their kids hopefully see this film or other information and reach out, and also the parents are ready to receive their erased children coming back. Because what I've found doing this is that a lot of parents, unfortunately, have been so traumatized, they aren't ready to receive their kids. So
Right.
all you can do is work on yourself, work on changing society by becoming an advocate, but you really have to be ready to put the past and the bitterness behind you when the kids come back.
Yeah, I think that that's absolutely a wonderful goal. In terms of, I know you said you don't want to get into gender politics, and I don't necessarily want to get into gender politics either. I will say as this much is that women are more capable of kind of uh, erasing dads from families than men are of erasing, in terms of family law, at least in the West, than dads are of erasing mothers from from the family.
Well, if I
But
can say one interesting thing about the film
mhm,
is that, first of all, over half of our supporters and followers are mothers who can't see their kids.
absolutely, and
So, I'm
I'm
not sure if that necessarily the people who are involved in a cause necessarily means it's statistically relevant in that way, because people who clamor for help are not necessarily representative of statistically what's going on. But
right.
I am seeing more and more mothers who are losing custody. And I had the opportunity to talk with a woman who runs an amazing organization in New York called Amazing Mothers Without Custody. And, she talked about that kind of the whole thing started because during her divorce procedure, she asked for sole custody
Hmm.
because she believed that was the norm and that you had to
Hmm.
go to court and hire a lawyer. And she said if she had known about joint custody from the beginning and that you could resolve this outside of court, everything would have been much different. And now she wouldn't have been a mother without custody as a result of a 3-year custody battle. So,
Agreed.
I do agree that it affects both mothers and fathers differently. But I
Mhm.
was surprised that 60% of our followers are women, and most of them would identify as mothers who've been erased.
I think
Yeah,
that
I think
there's a reason for that, and in many cases, women are much more likely to fight for against injustices that are done against them
yeah.
than men. It's something that I think women are much more proactive about that. So it probably doesn't reflect necessarily the numbers of men versus women who are facing these issues, but one group is far more likely to say, okay, I'm not going to take this. This has to stop, and stand up for themselves, which in some ways is admirable, very admirable.
Yeah.
And the fact that men will also benefit from this is likewise, thank you to these women for standing up for the rights of parents and for shared parenting initiatives. And
Yeah, I mean, this is really the thing, Allison and I both identify as men's rights advocates, right? And but we're not, we're not interested in reversing the tender years doctrine, or putting it back to father default father custody or anything like that. Like what men's advocates want is sort of the default presumption at the start of a custody battle or at the start of a divorce to be that both parents will be spending as much time as is reasonable with the children, so roughly equal, unless there's some reason to deviate from that, right? And so, I mean, what we want is for that presumption of shared custody to become sort of, like you said, that woman, she was like, oh, I thought sole custody was the norm. Well, sole custody is the norm across the West. The sole custodial parent and visiting parent model is the norm in the West. And so it's like a winner takes all system, and it causes so much combativeness, because if you don't win, you're losing, right? If you don't win everything, you lose everything. And so what we want is we want something where, where people are encouraged to cooperate with each other, when parents are encouraged to co-parent, and um, where the benefit to the child is maximized, right? Because right now, and a lot of these policies that exist in Western family courts, um, they're based on this idea that it is more traumatic and more disruptive to a child to not sleep in the same bed every night than it is to remove a loving parent from their lives, to just completely remove that loving parent from their lives. And I can't even imagine, I mean, if that was the case, if sleeping in a different bed one week and then another one, another week. If that was traumatic to children, we wouldn't allow them to go for sleepovers. We wouldn't allow them to stay with their grandparents for a week in the summer. We wouldn't allow them to go to summer camp, right? But somehow this situation where, it's traumatic and disruptive and it's stressful on the children to not sleep in the same bed every night, that is, that's more stressful to them than losing a parent who has been a daily fixture in their lives. It's absolutely, and whether that parent is a mother or a father, it's unconscionable.
Exactly. I mean, the interesting news is that we now have tons of empirical research that shows that this isn't the case, that the closest we can get statistically to the benefits of a dual parent household is shared parenting that's split nearly equally. So we have a ton of research on this, and also polling backs this up. I now serve as the Deputy Executive Director of the National Parents Organization, and they do a lot of research in the, mainly US focused, but it can apply to Canada as well. And the polling on the support for shared parenting is through the roof. I don't know of any other issue that polls so high. I can't say which state, but we did one state that we're going to release the data on, and 93% support shared parenting. So it's an issue that everybody can get behind. Christians and atheists, feminist men's rights activists, both sides of the political aisle. I don't think anything else, polls. And I was talking to somebody today and they were like, you know what? Our state legislators for this, the polling is for this, but the judges will block anything that takes away their judicial discretion. And one thing that the film talks about is judicial discretion is just another word for judicial bias. And we've seen this through studying the criminal court system, that defendants of certain racial backgrounds and even gender backgrounds get higher sentences normally. And if you as a judge don't have to justify any ruling through any research or scientific evidence, it's just another way to let discrimination seep into proceedings. And also what the film talks about that a lot of people are not aware of is that unfortunately most judges and magistrates who work in the family court system, and this varies very, very much by jurisdiction, even by local jurisdiction, many of them cycle in from civil or criminal court. Most people don't like dealing with family court cases because there's a joke among lawyers. In criminal court, you're dealing with bad people on their best behavior. In family court, it's good people on their worst behavior. It's a very toxic court system.
Yeah.
It's kind of, you can file charges for anything in family court. Whereas in the criminal justice system, as messed up as it is, there's usually a checks and balance about what you can charge someone with. And in family court, you can come in, you can not just invent something, but you can also bring in stuff that's true, but that most people would say is normal range parenting. I talked to one dad in California, a very wealthy and famous man who lost rights to his daughters because he sent them to school, one daughter to school. The mother forgot to give her the lunchbox. So the daughter said, "Don't worry, Dad, I'll put my lunch in a shoebox," and decorated with glitter. And he said, "That's so creative, honey." And then that was used against him to show that he's sending the lunch in a box that shoes were in. And he said that he couldn't believe this was brought up. He thought the judge would throw it out. And then he goes, "And now I can't see my daughters because of a shoebox." So it's not a fault, because that's what people get to. They often say false accusations. What I found is that we have true but absurd accusations because they just put parents together to find anything that proves that one parent is nominally better than the other. So it's not even these crazy stories that are being made up or false memories. They're just parenting differences, looking into each detail, looking into background. I'm also talking to a mom in New York. She's a lesbian mom, same-sex relationship, and she's paying about $50,000 or something for a forensic psych evaluation. And she said, at no point did they ask about me as a mother, my relationship with my son, but they went into the details of my romantic relationship with my ex-partner. And I've talked to everybody in my personal life about the romantic details of our breakup. She said, I'm waiting for somebody to, talk to me about how I am as a mother, not as a lover. and this is costing her $50,000. She's lost one house, and she'll probably lose her other house in New York.
Oh yeah, no, it's insane, in terms of so many, and frankly, most of the people that I talk to are men, fathers, because of what I do. Those are the people that write to me for the most part to discuss these issues. But the idea that you have to pay for your own psychological evaluation, and you have to pay for your own supervised visitation, you have to pay the person who's going to be supervising you while you visit your child at McDonald's for 2 hours,
Right.
One afternoon a month. The idea that you have to pay for all of these things, maybe you're paying for your ex-partner's legal fees as well, right? The amount of, that in itself, and this is typical in cases of divorce when the woman didn't work through the marriage. She was a stay-at-home mother, and the father was the one supporting the household, and he gets stuck with the entire, both his legal fees and her legal fees and all of the court costs and all of the filing costs and everything. It gives her kind of carte blanche. And I'm sure that there are some situations in which this is reversed, sort of the outlier situation where there is a woman who was the high earner, and the father was the stay-at-home dad. I guess Britney Spears and Kevin Federline and situations like that. But when you put the entire cost of the process on one of the parties, it gives carte blanche to the other party to just be a vexatious litigant, to constantly to fight to the death. Because they're not spending their own money there, right? And so, and because it is this winner takes all system, I think that that's probably the worst thing in the world. This idea that one parent should have custody and the other parent should have, generous every other weekend access. And that child support is actually kind of calculated based on the number of hours per day and per week that the child is in your custody. So if you have more custody, you get more child support. And if you have less custody, you get less child support. And it just, the whole thing seems to incent. And then the fact that, the state has every incentive to collect child support, to extract that from non-custodial parents, because, if that person is on a WIC or food stamps or welfare or some kind of Medicaid or, some kind of social program, right? They just deduct the child support off of those benefits. So the custodial parent is no better off. It's the state that's better off. The state's recouping some of its outlay, right? Whereas there's no incentive to enforce access, because that's all red ink. That entire endeavor is just red ink. It's just cost, right? So it's the entire system just seems set up to create these horrific situations, right? Just create them, even sometimes when they wouldn't have to exist. So
I wanted to actually bring some. I can't hear Ginger.
I'm here. I had it on mute because there was some background noise.
Okay. Well, I actually wanted to bring up an anecdote from my experience working with young men who deal with things like parental alienation. A couple of years ago, there was a young man who reached out to his father, and his father ended up not responding well. So when you talked about how what you want to do is help parents learn or develop the skills to be able to handle an adult child coming back and saying, I'd like to rekindle a relationship. That's really, I really appreciate that, because it is something, it's something that's being overlooked, I think, in this conversation. The fact that it can be very difficult for a parent to accept an adult child after having gone through this kind of a very, like you said, traumatic experience. So I just wanted to relay that and say I appreciate that you are opening up and addressing this this gap, I believe, in the services, because a lot of people don't even consider that. So
Right. Well, I mean, the film, as it shows children reuniting with their parents in real time, there are lessons for parents there, and some of it is putting the past aside and accepting that you may never be right, that you still may be blamed, but you can always focus on the future. And that as long as the conflict persists between the parents, children will automatically feel that they need to choose sides, or, and we don't talk about this, reject the entire family.
Mhm.
There's a lot of kids that just end up not wanting anything to do with anybody. That was more my path. And what parents in this situation have to do, and it's very hard, is really just be there to show love and support, not to bring up the ex ever, basically. Some children will ask for information. Some don't want to hear anything about it. And they don't want to hear anything about what happened in the past, to accept that and to move on and to focus on the future, because the children who come back and are able to have these loving relationships are there because they feel that the parent gives them love and support, not because they feel like the parent was a martyr. I often tell parents, don't become a martyr. If you know family courts are failing you, stop going to family court and accept that they're not going to help. They're just draining resources, energy, and money at some point. And you can switch into becoming an advocate. You can switch into finding ways to drip love to your child. There's a lot of ways to communicate with children online, even if you can't contact them. People don't realize that your children are watching everything you say online. Nothing is private. And in the film, we have an example of a parent who posts something from the father's rights movement, which is not that aggressive or mean, but just says, yeah, this was my first marriage. And it was something about, I'll just say that you hit me and you'll never see the kids again. And for that daughter, that was the reason why she'll never talk to her father, because he bashed the mother. So I see a lot of toxicity online, and these tend to get a lot of shares and a lot of likes. But from the perspective of the child, this is just fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And we often have to think, do we want a lot of likes and shares, or do we want to be beacons of hope and messages of love for the kids? If the goal is reunification with the kids and healthy kids, if the goal is to shame the other spouse or even to build a movement, then that's okay. But realize that you may lose your kids along the way. And there's a way to talk about this publicly and privately, acknowledging the unfairness of the system, but not the actions of the other parent. And I often tell people, if you can't say something nice about your ex, don't say something at all. And saying something nice is not, my ex was a master manipulator.
Mm-hmm.
Or my ex is the biggest bitch in the world. That's not saying something nice. And I remember one sweet example of a woman who had been through hell and back with her ex. And she actually posted a picture of her two sons doing some art project. And someone said, wow, they're so creative. And she said, thanks, their father's an artist and they get it from him. And I know how big of her it was in that moment to say that.
Oh
But
yeah,
that's what she said, and not adding something, and he's so creative with the court filings and dragging me through the mud. She just left it at that. And by being the bigger person, you really are in a position of strength and power. And this eventually will be acknowledged. I also tell people that you might do everything right and your kids still may not come back to you, and not to blame yourself. It's not magic and there's no secret sauce, but it's better to be as much as peace as you can and to work on yourself, because all you can do is control your own actions and your own thoughts in the end.
Right.
And then to work to bring that light to others. So that's one of the messages of the film. And I'm so happy that the Canadian Association for Equality with One Screen in conjunction with Honey Badgers Radio will be bringing the film on a Canadian tour of 9 cities and more to come. And to find out these locations, I'm sure you guys will put this on the screen, but it's erasingfamily.ca. And that will go to an Eventbrite with all the listings of the Canadian screenings. And if you want general information or to watch the trailer or to see how you can get involved, you can go to erasingfamily.org.
Yeah, no, I actually, we're going to have a screening, I think on October 17th here in Edmonton, where I am.
October 12th.
No, in Edmonton, where I am.
Sorry.
in Saskatoon, where Alice, or close to, well, sort of, not quite as buttfuck middle of nowhere.
Not as far as Edmonton. Closer.
Yeah, it's a little close to Allison. Saskatoon, that'll be October 12th. So, and Vancouver, and I'm guessing Toronto and Winnipeg, and so there are a whole bunch of screenings that Cafe is helping to essentially organize and co-organize. Across Canada. So I'm really actually glad to be part of this. I'm glad that Cafe kind of stepped up and did this. I think you said that earlier that, Canada is really taking the lead in getting this documentary out in front of eyes with bums on seats. And makes me proud to be a Canadian.
Canada's doing a great job, and it was great filming in Canada. We filmed in Calgary with Dr. Christine Giancarlo of Mount Royal University.
Oh, beautiful. I was going to mention her, yes, because she's a Parental Alienation Awareness Association. She's an amazing.
She is. She's a great expert.
She is such a badass. Like I wouldn't want to get on the wrong side of her in a debate. So, but no, she's awesome. She's absolutely awesome.
Well, I'm so glad that there will be all these Canadians screenings, and we are so happy to bring the film to Canada. So again, it's erasingfamily.ca for the list. They're starting quite soon, and we're grateful for all the support for the Canadian Association for Equality, and also for our lead Canadian associate producer, Kim McCord out of Vancouver, who's hosting that, who also provided with Cafe nearly half of the funding for the film. So that's a great example of a mother stepping up. And she's hosting a great screening in Vancouver on November 3rd. And I will be in attendance for that one. So I hope, that the Canadian screenings go well. And I thank you for this time to talk about the film and promote it.
All right, awesome. Yeah, no, thank you for coming on. And I guess we better let you go. It's been half an hour, and all right.
Thank you so much. Very grateful. And I can't wait to hear how the screenings go in Canada.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.
Bye. Okay, so I just want to, before we leave, I just want to point out or just give this information. So the Saskatoon screening of Erasing Families will be followed by a panel discussion with myself, Karen, Lindsay Martinez, and Brian Martinez afterwards. And there may be special guests, Mojo Martinez and Borat Strawn. Is that his name?
It is Borat Strawn.
Okay, so that's October 12th at 7 p.m. I don't know, should I give the address?
It'll be on the Eventbrite, so you might as well.
Yes, it's going to be the Broadway Theater. So that's where it's going to be. I guess, you know what?
Hey, the Edmonton screening is at the University of Alberta. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now that I've released that information, all the protesters can go there.
Yeah. And I really appreciate her message of just reducing the conflict going forward. I mean, I've had to sort of do the same because in my work behind the scenes, working one-on-one with people going through these kinds of issues, there was a man who's lost contact of his daughters through family courts, and he was kept fighting and fighting and fighting to the point where it was causing him to lose a sense of like his mental health, basically. And I told him, it doesn't serve them to ignore what's going on and how you're suffering and not dealing with that. Maybe step back and deal with that and become more stable and more balanced, and then bring that to your relationship. And in the future, I think that'll be more likely to bring them back to you than continuing this fight when it's compromising your ability to really cope.
Well, if you look at the tearjerker story in the Red Pill movie, Fred Hayward,
Yeah.
right? And how he was cut. He gave up. He gave up the struggle to keep his son in his life, right? Because it was just destroying his health.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a constant battle, right? It was a constant fight. It was, having to return to court over and over and over again, having to have the same fight over and over and over again. And when the movie came out, his son, who was 14 at that time, I believe, got in touch with him.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been
Reestablished.
reunited, right? So, it was, okay, enough. Borat, I'm not bringing you to Saskatoon.
You're losing your invitation, Borat.
That's right. Oh no, there's a woman with a tiny little white dog walking outside.
It's critical to alert them to the fact that there's a tiny dog inside, right?
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, how will that dog outside know that Borat doesn't approve of his existence if Borat doesn't tell him?
Exactly.
So.
Oh yeah, so I'm looking forward to this, and I hope you guys, if you're able to get to Saskatoon, I hope you come and join us for the.
Yeah, I'm probably going to be bringing Nick Redding to Saskatoon.
Oh, that's always fun.
Yeah, it all depends on and I mean, I might have to fly, but probably not. I have to jump my car. You should have seen the way the battery terminals looked. They were it was like a snowdrift in shades of blue and beige on the battery terminals. So let's see if I can get the car started today, and we'll see if it'll get me out to Saskatoon. If it does, I will be bringing Nick Redding, the legendary Nick Redding, with me.
Well, maybe we could spring for a rental if it completely dies on you.
I don't think it'll die. It needs a tune-up. I'll
Okay.
have to do that, but
all right. So October 12th and October 17th.
Yes.
October 17th, Edmonton. October 12th, Saskatoon. The tickets will be somewhere here-ish. Somewhere. I'll give you a link. You can put it in the card. Yeah. So yeah.
So, yeah.
So
no,
far.
I can never do that.
Yeah, it's actually really confusing. All right, I'm gonna stop.
All right.
See ya.
Okay.